Good evening. I'm Rebecca Endy Lichtenberg, Studio's Managing Director.
And I'm David Muse, Studio's Artistic Director.
We are broadcasting tonight from our building at the corner of 14th and P, all in safe, socially distant spaces. But it feels really exciting to be back in the building, really the first time since we have shut down in March. And like the place that we wanted to be to talk about launching our season and producing theater again. We are so glad that you could join us and that you've continued to stand with us through this dark period. We can't wait to get back to making art and sharing it with all of you. I'm going to hand things over to David to talk about how we've reimagined making theater for this moment.
Thank you, Rebecca, and hello, everyone. And hello from the Matheny Theater, which is grateful to have somebody in it talking to you today. I'm going to touch on everything that we're doing as part of the season this year. I won't go over things in excruciating detail because, of course, you can read more about any of these things either on our website or through Google. But I think to start with an overview is the right place to start. As I go through this, I'm going to be joined from time to time by Reg Douglas, who is Studio's Artistic Director. His face will be popping up before too long. He's been with us for a number of months. He actually joined right before we sent everyone home. There's Reg.
Hello.
And he's going to be talking about at least one of the productions and also chiming in from time to time to let me know what I forget to say. So, the first thing to say is, it's been an incredibly long process getting here. We've made a number of seasons, abandoned a number of seasons, planned for them, let them go. Now here we are. We're at a place where we feel like we have a fair degree of confidence that we can do everything we're about to talk about. And of course, we're realistic that more changes are possible as events in the world continue to unfold. But as of today, here's what we're planning, and we're really excited to talk about it with you. I will say in general, all of the projects that compose the season are new. What I mean by that is that none of the projects survived from our previously announced season, given the constraints we put ourselves under for obvious reasons. The season comes to you in a variety of modes. It's audio, digital, installation-based, which is a sort of first for studio, and then finally in person. And every single bit of it involves something that we've never done before at Studio. So it's going to be a wild ride. The thing, it's conceptualized as a gradual return, not so much to normal, but to something approaching old normality. So here we go. We're going to talk about 4 things. 3 of those things are officially parts of the season. And one is a little bit of a kind of season hors d'oeuvre that comes on the front end. I'm actually going to talk about it last. So part 1 of season proper at Studio Theater is something we're calling Studio in Frame. Well, I suppose let me back up for one moment and say the overall season we're calling Studio in the Moment. And that's a phrase that's meant to capture both, we think, the sort of nowness of a lot of the work that composes the season, but also, it's an acknowledgement that the modes of production are unique to this moment in history. So it is very in the moment, and we certainly feel as we produce it, very in the moment, very in the moment every single day. Okay, so part 1 is Studio in Frame. Everything follows this sort of in situation. Studio in Frame is 2 digital dramas. One is Cock by Mike Bartlett that I'm directing. The other, there's a little bit of actually an error on this slide. It's Until the Flood. That's a play written by Dale Orlander Smith, originally performed by her, reconceptualized by Reg Douglas on the screen with me there. both of these dramas are will be filmed here at Studio Theater with artists all together in one room, and there will be no audiences there. So it's not theater coming from living rooms, and it's not yet we're all back in the theater together. And we're conceiving of them as not just, what I think we've all seen before, which is a taped version of a stage production. Instead, we're trying to create something sort of brand new, part theater, part Zoom, part film experience that's sort of composed from the beginning in a way that's designed to be received digitally through a screen, but that also, participates in what we know as theater. So it should feel like theater, but hopefully also not feel like I really wish I were in the theater to watch this, if you know what I mean.
I've been joking that it's less Hamilton and more hybrid.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
It's a whole new medium.
So the first one is Cock. That's a play by Mike Bartlett. I directed a production in our theaters something like 6 years ago. And when we were imagining what we might do in this kind of hybrid form, Cock was one of the first things I lighted on as something that excites me because of its form. It's a play that's designed to be performed quite explicitly with no scenery. Actors don't need to be anywhere close to one another. Like the action actually happens across space with the words that they're using. There's no touching necessary. And it's a play in which actors get to describe what they're doing. Like, oh, I changed my clothes, or look, I'm sitting down, without actually literally doing that thing. So it got me pretty jazzed in terms of what it might be in this kind of new format. So it's not just a remount of the production I did before. It's like a newly conceived version of that play for this new medium. It's a play about competition in the arena of sex and love. And part 2 of our Studio in Frame series is Until the Flood. And Reg, why don't you say a few things about that?
Sure. Well, it's really nice to meet everyone virtually. I wish I could be meeting you here in the Milton lobby, but it's good to be here virtually with all of you. My journey to DC was a wild roller coaster these first few months, but the thing that remains the same is my commitment and studio's commitment to finding plays that are at the intersection of the personal and the political. And I think Until the Flood is just that. It was written by Dale Orlando Smith, one of the great Pulitzer Prize winning solo performers and writers, as a reflection upon Michael Brown's passing in 2014 Ferguson, Missouri. Unfortunately, events like that still plague our country, and the rise and call for racial justice remains. And I think what Dale's able to do by reflecting a community that she's gathered through real interviews, she brings to the stage different voices, different perspectives on racial justice, racial injustice, and the ways that we as a community can come together. And so for this production, we'll be hiring 3 talented intergenerational Black actresses to take on all these roles and find the ways that in their bodies, the spirit of our country can be reflected in a new way. So I'm really excited to make my studio debut in a way I never imagined, but to also keep the spirit of the political charge work that I think's grounded studio. For me as a fan from afar and now a member of the team, that is yet alive, even in this new hybrid moment.
Yeah, thanks, Reg. We're excited to watch you do it.
Yeah,
and I think it's a terrific project for you.
We'll figure this out together.
So that's part 1. Part 2, we're calling Studio Installed. It's a production called Flight. It's like nothing we've ever produced before. It's a little hard to describe, but I'll give it a go. The first thing to understand is you show up for it at an appointed time rather than the whole audience shows up at 8 o'clock. And when you arrive, you are escorted into an individual viewing station, essentially. And you're sitting around a circular object with other individual booths. You put on some headphones that have been cleaned and disinfected for you. And you hear in your ears an audio play. And then in front of you, and sort of precisely timed to the story that you're hearing in each of these individual booths, is a rotating series of dioramas that you watch one at a time. They're little exquisitely designed set models, some big, some small, different perspectives, different visual tricks that turn this audio play into a simultaneous sort of three-dimensional graphic novel that you watch in front of you. It's a story about two orphan brothers trying to escape from Afghanistan to the United Kingdom. So that's where it gets its name, Flight. It's an adaptation of a novel. It was a big hit at the Edinburgh Fringe, an event put together by a team of Scottish artists, one of whom is named Jamie Harrison, who was the brainchild behind the magic and illusions in the Harry Potter stage plays, which were a big hit, of course, on the West End and Broadway before everything was shut down. So that's part two. Reg, anything else I should add about Flight?
I was just, when I first encountered the piece, when you sent the email, I said, oh, it's so intimate. And I think, that clearly is a word that comes to mind with studio. And in terms of the social distancing, you can't quite get more intimate than just you. So I'm excited to see a new perspective on that kind of studio trademark with Flight.
Yeah. Well, I've seen it. It's awesome. And it really is one of those things that sort of opens your mind to all of the various modes that we can use to tell theater in a way that sort of breaks out of the box that we normally live in. Okay, so that's part two. Part three is at the end of the season. It's a sort of mini festival of plays performed by one performer. It's 4 plays, eventually all running in rep in a couple of our spaces, and each of them are solo performer plays. So this is the first time in the season, and we're talking about now next summer. And it's the first time in the season where we will welcome small audiences, limited and spread out, back into the building to watch, like I said, plays with one performer. These are the 4 plays. They are, number 1, the 2.5-minute Ride by Lisa Crone, who wrote the book To Fun Home, which was, of course, one of the plays that we were about to produce and had shut down by the coronavirus. It's an autobiographical play about her Midwestern family and her father. It's Lisa Crone, so it's very funny. It's also quite surprisingly moving, and also thought-provoking in ways that you don't expect when the story kind of kicks off. So that's one of the 4. Then we're going to do a play called Flow by an artist named Will Power, which Will actually performed at the Studio Theater, I don't even know, something like 15 years ago, in the special event series, back then. This is a new production of that play for a new generation. It's a classic hip hop theater piece. And in that sense, it's a perfect play for Saul Mayenne 24, a director who's been with us as a Doris Duke artist in residence for the last year, directed Passover, which was actually the last play that we produced before everything was shut down. Strikes me as, and it's delightful. Great piece for Saul. So that's number 2. Number 3 is a brand new play, a world premiere play. It's called Tender Age. It's written by George Brandt, who wrote Grounded. That's another play that we produced at the studio, I don't know, something like 5 or 6 years ago. It's about a man who takes a job as a security guard and learns that the people who he's guarding are children in an immigrant detention facility who have been separated from their families. It's a harrowing and moving story and incredibly well written. And then part 4, or number 4, is a play called Random by a Black British writer named Debbie Tucker Green. Debbie Tucker Green is a writer who we've been enthusiastic about at Studio for close to a decade, have been reading most everything she writes, have been sort of waiting for the right time to do a play of hers. And it felt like, well, how about right now? She has this terrific one-character play called Random. It's a play about a random act of violence in the streets of London. The writing is extraordinary. And it's a tour de force opportunity for a young Black actor. So that's Random by Debbie Tucker Green. And those are the 4. They'll be presented 2 per night at staggered times so that the audiences don't overlap or interact with one another. And once we get up to steam, all 4 of them will be running at the same time. So we should have a little bit of that energy that comes from running plays in rep. Reg, anything you would add about the...
No, I'm really excited to see what these creative teams do. I mean, to be able to share spaces is a kind of another technical tour de force. So hats off to our production department in advance, but also to really stretching our directors and designers to deliver that, high quality studio performance and production value, but in a very different way. So I'm excited to see what happens.
That's right, because the plan is to have 2 of the plays in one space in one theater and 2 of the plays in another theater, sort of rotating every other night. And maybe, on a weekend, you could have 2 plays actually in one theater, one in the afternoon and one in the evening. So those are the 3 main pillars of the season proper. And like I mentioned before, we're kicking it off on the front end with a little appetizer that we're calling Studio in Your Ears. Studio in Your Ears are Studio's first ever audio plays. We have actually more or less wrapped up recording the first of them. That's a play called Kings by Sarah Burgess. Kings is a play we produced at Studio a few years ago. It's about politics and power and Washington, D.C. and money and politics. And given that that's where everyone's mind is at the moment, and given that it's a play, it's kind of like a fast-talking political play that doesn't really rely on much scenery at all. It all happens kind of in the dialogue between the characters. So it felt like it suited this form. And so we went ahead and rushed it to production to get it out before election night. So it will be dropping sometime next week.
Yeah, officially next Thursday. So
there you go, next Thursday.
For free.
We got Marty Lyons to direct. She directed The Wolves quite brilliantly here at Studio a few years ago. And we were also able to coax Rick Fauché out of retirement to play one of the roles. So that's Kings, that's number 1. And then we're going to do a play called I Hate It Here. That's a brand new audio play. We commissioned it over the summer from a writer named Ike Holter. Ike is a Chicago-based playwright whose star is really rising, yet to be produced in Washington. And this play is, I would describe it as a series of energetic vignettes about now, and especially about living with the coronavirus and dealing with race in America. And Ike writes with a certain full-throated, energetic, high-octane style. which I think is suited to both of those topics.
Yeah. And there's a song. So it's going to be great.
And there's a song. Figuring out how to produce that has been a real trick, because of course it's not being recorded like you normally would in a recording studio. It's being recorded in a series of actors' living rooms that we've turned into recording studios. And they all essentially send their files in to the sound design and production team, who assemble all of the pieces and give it a buff and polish. Yeah,
and that should be ready for December. So stories from the end of the world before the new year is our hope.
So those are our plans. That Studios reimagined the season for next year. I think now we're going to welcome Rebecca back into the room. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi.
She's going to talk a little bit about season protocols, and then we're going to open things up for questions. So over to you, Rebecca.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about safety, which I'm sure is something that is on everyone's mind. When we were asking ourselves, what are the key questions and how do we go about planning the season, keeping our audiences and our artists and our staff safe and figuring out how to produce art in a way that we could do that was incredibly critical to that planning. And that's why we're, sort of reopening gradually. We're starting with virtual content. We're, anticipating inviting you back to the building and kind of next spring at the earliest to sit in an individual booth. And then in the summer, we're going to be moving to very limited audiences in our theater spaces. When you come back to studio, it is going to be a different experience from sort of the minute you walk in the door. You are going to get an assigned entry time, so that you have to show up at a particular window in order to safely kind of move through our public spaces and to your seats in order to really enforce social distancing in all of our public spaces. We're going to ask everyone to fill out a questionnaire based on the CDC's questions to be granted access to the building. Mask wearing is going to be required at all times in the building. That means that we will not be selling concessions. You can't enjoy a glass of wine before the show. We just think that is the safest way to have people back. We have also suspended our volunteer usher program for the season. We're going to be using all fully professional front of house staff to ensure that all of our safety protocols are followed. Tickets and programs will be digital in order to minimize contact. So that will be sort of a new thing where you'll get your digital program ahead of coming to the theater instead of while you're here. We've also upgraded all of our HVAC filters to MERV 13 level hospital grade filters, and we're also investing in additional air purification. So we are doing everything that we can to make this the safest experience possible. Many of you may also remember that last winter, which now feels like a really long time ago, we had just made a public announcement about a big renovation project called Open Studio to open our building up to the community and to invest in a state-of-the-art flexible theater space. And we were supposed to break ground in July. But ultimately, we felt like in order to produce during the pandemic and to really be able to utilize all the spaces in our building, in order to socially distance people, we didn't want to be under construction. We really wanted to limit who could come into the building. So that project is temporarily on hold, and we are working with our architects and our construction team to figure out when we can safely move that project forward again. With all of that, to keep you safe, we know that some of you still may not feel comfortable coming to the theater, and that's okay. We have a streaming-only subscription available, so that's an option for anyone who doesn't feel comfortable coming. You can opt for streaming only. You can view all of our content that's being made, available online at home, and that's an option that if you want to take, you're welcome to let us know that now. You can call the box office or email the box office. We're also going to share a form in the chat. You're welcome to fill that out and let us know. You're also welcome to just hang on to your in-person seats and decide later as we get closer what you want to do and what you feel most comfortable with. But we really wanted to give everyone as many options as possible to meet your comfort level and how we were planning this season. So I know that there are probably lots of questions, and we are going to start with a couple of questions that some of you submitted ahead of time, but we're also going to be taking questions in the chat. So if you have a question and you haven't already submitted, get it ready in the comments, and we will get to as many of those as we can. So I'm going to we're going to bring David back so he can answer some of these questions as well. And I am going to take a first question that we got submitted in advance. And that question is, what is included in my subscription package? Great question. So if you are doing a traditional subscription where you anticipate coming to the theater, your subscription package includes both of our in-frame productions, which are Cock and Until the Flood. It includes Flight, and it also includes 2 of our studio in first-person shows. So you can pick 2 of those 4, and you can also certainly add on more of those if you want. If you want a digital subscription, what that package is going to include is both of our in-frame productions and then 3 of the studio in-frame shows, 2.5-Minute Ride, Tender Age, and Flow. So that's all of the content that we're going to be able to make available streaming. It's included in your package. So again, you don't have to decide now, but when you're ready, you can let us know which of those 2 options you want to go with. And then, of course, all of our subscribers are going to also have access to the In Your Ears audio plays starting next Thursday with Capes. Great. Our next question is, how will you determine if it's safe to return to the theater for in-person experiences? So we're going to look to a couple of guideposts for that. We're certainly going to be following guidance from the city, looking at what's happening in our local area, what the spread rates are. We're also going to be working really closely with the unions, who are enforcing a lot of protocols to keep their union members safe. And that's going to have a large impact as well as we determine if and when it's safe to reopen to audiences. We are committed to making art this season. And so, as we go forward, if we figure out that the initial dates that we were working towards don't feel safe, we're going to adjust and figure out how to make the season work and, respond to what's happening with the pandemic. Great. Next question is, when are these season performances happening and when will we have people back in the building? So we've obviously been a little bit vague about that. We anticipate that our virtual content is going to start streaming in the first quarter of 2021, and that Flight would be happening sometime in the spring, and the in-person series would be happening in the summer. But again, we're going to stay flexible. We're going to respond to what's happening locally with the pandemic, and likely we're going to be announcing sort of definitive dates at least 6 weeks out of when these performances are going to be happening, perhaps a little bit more in advance of that. But we're, again, maybe adjusting as we go. I think, let's see. Our next question is about Flight and what the audience experience of Flight is like. David, I'm going to hand that one over to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like, it's not like a normal play. To begin with, it's private. I mean, you could come with someone, roughly the same time and sit kind of in proximity, but it's a solo experience. You're in an individual booth. There are no live actors, so the entire thing comes in, through your ears, and then and you just kind of watch this astonishing series of little models, which I love, because in the theater we work with models all the time, and because that's how we design sets. And normally that's a part of the theater that the audience never gets to experience, but it's actually a big part of theater making. So in that sense, it's really familiar to us. It feels theatrical at the end of the day. And at least me, I walked out and I felt like, wow, that's like nothing like a play that I'm used to. And it felt a lot like the experience of taking in a play. So that's Flight.
Thanks, David. So our next question is about how we're going to implement social distancing in our performance spaces. So most of you know that our theaters seat about 200 people, roughly. We are going to cap attendance at 45, so that really is a very limited audience for in-person shows. We are going to have assigned seating for all performances, and those seats will be available in pre-selected groups, either a pair or a single. So depending on what you're, whether you're looking for 1 ticket or 2 tickets, if you've got a larger group, you are going to have to split up amongst those options, but you're going to be pre-seated into those determined seating locations in order to ensure that people are 6 feet apart in the theater at all times. For our subscribers, that does mean that you're not going to be in your normal subscription seat. All sort of bets are off when it comes to normal this year. And so, we're going to really be a lot more flexible with those subscriber seats. And we'll sort of return to honoring those historic seat locations when we can, when we're no longer social distancing in the theaters. Our next question is about the number of subscription packages that you need if you're going to be viewing the season in a streaming mode. So if the question is, if we normally have 2 subscription packages and we know we want the streaming option, do we still need 2 packages? So we are treating our streaming subscription packages as if you were coming to the theater. So it is an honor system, but we are asking that if you normally buy 2 subscriptions for 2 subscribers, that you still purchase 2 subscribers packages for the streaming season as well. And that's also going to ensure that if you do want to come to the theater, you opt later to switch back into in-person, you've got 2 seats available to you. If you're just streaming, that you've got those 2 packages. The next question is, can I change my mind mid-season and decide that I want to stream? Yes. So we are staying as flexible as possible. You can keep your in-person tickets for now and later decide that you want to stream, and we will honor that and we will switch you over to streaming. If you are pretty certain that you want to stream, you can let us know that now, and then if we're in a very different situation by the summer, we will still convert you back to in-person tickets, and we will accommodate that and get you seats that are available at that time. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you when and how you make decisions about your subscription package. Great. What's our next question? We're just pulling some things from the chat. So the question is, what's included in my subscription if I renewed? So as I sort of mentioned before, either if you renew, you're getting the in-person package, which is going to be both of the in-frame productions, tickets to flight, and 2 of the in-first-person productions. If you go with the digital, you're going to get both of the in-frames and then 3 of the studio in-first-person performances. So you're going to tell us which of those 2 package options you want, and you'll get one set or the other set depending. That it's a little bit complicated. All things are a little bit complicated in this new world we're in. Great, we're just pulling some more questions out of the chat. I think we're going to take one more question in there. See what things you all are burning to ask us. Share your questions if you have them, and we will answer them. Well, maybe we have succeeded in answering all burning questions, which I think is good. It means that we've done our jobs and we've given you a lot of information about the season. If you're out there and you do have a question and you didn't want to share it in the chat, or you think of it later, feel free to get in touch with us. We do have limited hours, but our box office is open. You can call us, you can email us. We will get back to you. If you have a subscriber or you were a subscriber last year, we're also going to be reaching out to you in the coming months to confirm what kind of package you want to answer your questions. So we will also be proactively reaching out to all of you so that you can get more of your questions answered, and you can let us know, how you want to deal with your subscription. All right, we have one last question. How's our morale at this moment? I mean, at this very moment, I would say being back in the theater and doing this event and talking about making art again feels really exciting. We've been living in a world of uncertainty and, as David mentioned, planning and replanning and planning and replanning. And, we now have a plan that we feel like makes a lot of sense and is really possible in this new world. And so I think, that to me feels exciting, and my morale is a little higher than it has been over the last 7 months. David, how would you say your morale is?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would It's been a really challenging series of months for us at Studio, and I think for everyone in various ways, almost everywhere. And, to be a theater company that doesn't get to produce any theater is, on some level, it's crazy making. And then also to feel like it's quite difficult to make plans to do much of anything. As people who spend all of our days making plans and putting them into motion, it was a really challenging time. And to have settled on something that feels to us both like a challenge, but also safe and achievable at the same time, and to sort of start to get the ducks in a row to produce the thing. I think for me personally, and for a lot of us at Studio, it's been a boost to morale, and it makes us feel a little bit like we're emerging from one period and into another.
And I think, we're all knocking on wood and crossing our fingers and our toes that, circumstances allow us to invite you all back to the building sooner rather than later. And that, come spring, we are going to see you all in person again. So, let's all knock on wood for that. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sticking with Studio while we've been dark. We're really excited to be able to sort of virtually welcome you to our content in this new virtual world, and then ultimately to be able to actually welcome you back into the building with open arms. I hope that you will all tune in next Thursday. Our first audio play is going to drop. That is going to be available to stream directly on our website, so it'll be really easy to find and access there. And we hope that you all enjoy it and that we can see you soon. Have a great night. Goodbye.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye.